Beginning this week, we will start hearing from the Gospel according to Luke in the daily Mass reading. So next week, we'll start working our way through Luke. So we begin not at the beginning of the Gospel of Luke, which is, the Annunciation and the birth of Jesus, the shepherds, but at the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. And the first thing he does is he goes to his hometown. And we get here in this brief little account, a lot of drama actually happens, but we get a synopsis of the mission of Jesus. Okay, he comes to preach the visitation of Israel, that God has come, sent the Messiah. He is the Messiah, and his message is rejected. And they try to put him to death, as we know will happen in the Passion at the end of his public ministry on earth. So we see a little microcosm of that right there in his hometown. We also get a glimpse of normal synagogue services. This is, I'll say a little more about the drama that takes place. But we do get a glimpse of what a synagogue service was like on a normal Sabbath. It would be the custom for people just to gather on Saturdays, not be working, and then they have the liturgy of the Word. In fact, our liturgy of the Word is a daughter of the synagogue service. So they would have, where we have, for instance, on Sundays, the Old Testament reading, then one of the Psalms, ideally is chanted, and then something from the New Testament writings of St. Paul or one of the letters, and then the gospel, the words of Jesus. The synagogue service would have been the law and the prophets, and usually read by someone who might be a scribe or a teacher of the law in particular. The first reading would be the law, so the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. Pentateuch is another name for it. And then the prophets, something from the prophets or other spiritual writings, but mostly the prophets. And that could be read by any layman in the community. And so Jesus is given that opportunity to do that because they know that he's been out teaching and he's a rabbi, a teacher of sorts. And that one of the interesting details here that there's scrolls. In fact, you go to a synagogue today and you'll see that they all have their copy of the scrolls, especially the Torah. And it is rolled up on two posts and rolled up like this, in on itself. And as you read it, you unroll it a little bit and then read more. It's reading from right to left. And then you roll it back. So that's this rolling up of the scroll or using the scroll like that. It's time to read from this passage of Isaiah. And the other thing is he sits down when he preaches because this was the teaching posture of a rabbi. In fact, sometimes even in Catholic liturgy, you'll see a bishop sit at the chair when he does the teaching. So, that's kind of interesting. But what's more interesting here and what we're supposed to pay attention to is that Jesus comes in and he preaches, and they're filled with awe and wonder, but they also react strongly to his message. And it's put here as one event, like the first time he visited. It may be that he was there for a week, and some of the preaching, he might have spoken a number of times there. That's some of the conjecture. But we're getting like the first and the last time he spoke. The first time where they were filled with awe and wonder. The last time where they're going to throw him out of town. It'd be like me getting up here and saying something that you're so offended by that you just rile up in anger and carry me over to the lake and throw me in. It's that dramatic, that much drama going on. So why were they so offended? Well, at first, he reads the prophecy of Isaiah of the coming of the Messiah, the anointed one. The Lord is sent me, has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, to recovery of sight to the blind. This is one of the great images of what the Messiah will be. And then his homily begins, today the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. I'm here. So that's one thing we glean from this. But then, as they're amazed at him, then the next line is, isn't this Joseph's son? Which is the beginning of the thinking of, who does he think he is? He's just a kid from town. This is somebody from town who grew up here And to claim to be the Messiah, really? And then they take offense at what he says because he compares them to, two prophets, Elijah and then his protege, Elisha, who went and didn't provide ministry to the people of Israel, but because they were unfaithful to God, but responded to Gentiles. Those are the references. If you look up those stories, they responded to Gentiles, not the people of Israel. And so that's also a foreshadowing of the ministry to the Gentiles. A lot of stuff is packed in here as sort of used as a literary device. So they react to that as though they're being rejected. That's a lot of the reaction. But I think I'd like to focus on just a couple of things, even though there's a lot to be packed in there. One is this, the prophet's not accepted in his own, a prophet is not accepted in his own land or in his own home. And so he's back at his hometown of Nazareth. And so obviously that is captured. They don't really get who he is. And of course, the mission to the Jewish people to become Christian mostly fails. The earliest group, of course, apostles and some of the earliest followers. And as we read the Acts of the Apostles, yes, they were of Jewish descent, but most of the success of the proclamation of the gospel was to the Gentile world. So that's one thing. But I think what do we personally gain from that? Well, it reminds us we sometimes have to remember where we are hearing something. Sometimes we block out messages because we hear them so much that we don't pay attention anymore. You know that notion, a lot of parents have this experience where they're trying to tell their kid how to be a good kid, how to do the right thing. You know, you got to practice if you want to be a good musician. You got to do your homework if you want to be smart. You got to do these things to become a better person. And the kids don't pay attention. But if their coach says it, or if their favorite teacher says it, they'll come back and say, "Mom, you know what my coach said today?" And they'll say, "Well, that's what I've been telling you your whole life." You know, there's that familiarity breeds contempt. Sometimes we aren't hearing something we need to hear. And I'll tell you, I think it's true about the Catholic Church too. Our church has consistently been teaching so much for a long time. And a lot of our teachings we just block out because we're not interested, or I've heard that. And we're not really paying attention to the beauty that's there. So I think we need to remind ourselves to stay open. But here's something else I'd like to draw to your attention that kind of ties in with the first reading. What Jesus is also saying here is he's not here like Isaiah to speak about a message or a way or a path. Jesus is the message. Jesus is the way. He is the path. You know, he says that, "I am the way and the truth and the life." This is very unique among all religious leaders. He's not saying, "I'm teaching you a way to truth and understanding and heaven." He says, "No, I am the way." We're called to be in relationship with Christ. That's our path. Where St. Paul will say later something very unique. I come to preach not wisdom, but Jesus Christ crucified. I come to teach you about a person that you need to know, not just so that you're going to listen to what he says, but so you are in relationship with him. That's what baptism establishes. That's what Eucharist confirms. We actually take him into our bodies, so intimate. And listening to the word, it's not just a guidance for a mental, interesting thought experiment. It should change who we are, how we live. So that's a very important thing and a unique claim about Christianity. Jesus is the message, the Word made flesh. So may we always be open, especially in places that are in ways right in front of us, to how God is trying to reach us. And that we may recognize our faith is rooted on knowing and being in relationship with Jesus. It's not just about the intellectual information, but it's knowing and being in relationship with Jesus Christ.